there are things we can do to kind of not foster healthy competition, but I think a little bit of, having goals and having people feel like, they earned something because they worked really hard, like fair competition. I think that there are ways to have some element of competition that can be very healthy. And at the end of the day, I guess we all have to ask ourselves, like, are we going for this goal because we want to win the competition? Or are we going for this goal because it's our dream and we want to work hard and we want to, succeed at something?
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Everything Band, a podcast that features conversations with composers, conductors, and performers of music for winds and percussion. My name is Mark Connor. I'm a composer, and this is episode 55. My guest for this episode is Emily Threinen. Before we begin, I'd like to thank all of you for listening. I appreciate your time, and I hope that you are finding value from these interviews. I rely on word of mouth and social media to bring the show to new listeners. If you think you know one or two people who might find these interviews useful, please let them know about it. You can also help by following me and sharing posts on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube. Now, on to the episode. Hi, Emily.
Hello, Mark. Thanks for inviting me.
Well, thank you for joining me. I really appreciate your time.
It's a pleasure to be here.
So, Emily, could you introduce yourself for the listeners?
Yes, my name is Emily Threinen, and I'm the director of bands at the University of Minnesota. I have been here just 2 years, and prior to that, I was the director of bands at Temple University in Philadelphia. Prior to that, it was at Shenandoah Conservatory in Virginia, and then before that, Duke University in North Carolina.
So, Emily, one of the things I ask all of my guests is I ask them about their early music experience and how they got involved in bands. So what was your early musical career? How did you get into music?
Well, I'm the first person to pursue music in my family. And I would say music was not really a part of our household. And it was in fifth grade, which is true for many of us, where at some point a music teacher, I don't even remember who, to be honest, but a music teacher brought instruments to a room, or at least brought us to a room full of instruments, and just said, we're starting a band next year, and if any of these instruments appeal to you, let us know. And so we were able to look at all of them and touch them and kind of try to play them. And the saxophone was the instrument that I was the most attracted to right away. And I think there were many of us that were probably interested in that. Because when I went up to the teacher and I said, I think I want to play this one, the teacher said, well, that's a great idea, but lots of kids are choosing this. Would you consider the clarinet instead? And handed me the clarinet, and I started playing that, and I said, this should be great. It's a little bit lighter too, so sounds like a good idea. And it was there that I really started to just love band and love playing with other people on instruments. And I started taking lessons when I was in high school. And I would say, in a way, when it comes to kind of the big picture or the long range of my early training, I did take lessons in high school, but really from fifth grade through high school, band was my only outlet for music expression. Actually, let me rephrase that. Band and choir. I did do choir in elementary school, but then took up the band instrument in fifth grade. And so I didn't have a lot of intense experiences like one-on-one private lessons until high school. And then in high school, I started enjoying band even more, taking it more seriously. My high school director said that he thought I had a special talent on the clarinet, and that, if I really practiced, that maybe I could pursue this more seriously. And then he encouraged me to take private lessons with a member of the Minnesota Orchestra. I'm actually a native of Minnesota. So, yep. So it was interesting to have that idea. So I guess I know a long answer to your question. I guess it was really just in band that I was in music, band and choir at the very early stages, but I didn't take it seriously until my junior year of high school.
Do you remember anything from high school, those teachers that really sticks out?
Well, as many people say, and I really believe it's very true, the teacher in my high school, I think, was really the reason why I even considered this as a professional career, because he was so invested in his own job. He cared so much about the students. He was such a loving person and a family man, and was very, very supportive of me, and really was the person that said, I think you might have a special talent in this. You might want to consider doing this for a career. And he was the one that got me interested in this professional, I should say professional, but youth organization, Greater Twin Cities Youth Symphony. He was also the one that got me into region band, taught me or informed me about all-state band, which I got into. And I think just introduced me to a greater world of music education and music performance. And so I attribute a lot of the beginning of my quote unquote success or journey to him. And I have to say, what was really sweet and special about me coming back to Minnesota is that his name is Tim Smith, and he's the high school director up at Zimmerman High School in Minnesota. And I called him right away and I said, Mr. Smith, I got the job as director of bands at the University of Minnesota. And he almost started tearing up on the phone, and I think was just very proud. And so he and I connected, of course, over the summer when I came back. And then we actually shared a concert together where I brought the University of Minnesota Wind Ensemble up to Zimmerman High School. And we each conducted each other's groups. And it was really a special, special treat to kind of come full circle in a way.
Oh, that's very cool.
Yeah.
To me, that's what really makes this so special is, as high school teachers or as music teachers in general, we have such a power sometimes and we don't even know it.
It's true. And, and I taught high school for 3 years, and, you do your very best to impart what you can on students and try to empower them and show them what their potential is. And once in a while, 5, 10, 20 years later, these students will come back or will send you an email and say, here's what I'm doing. And actually coming back to Minnesota, I got several Facebook messages from many of my students when I was teaching high school here in the state and giving me updates of what they were doing professionally. And a handful of them are doing music, whether they're teaching or music therapy or even performing. So that's been really satisfying to see them as like adults living their dream.
Yeah, it's really cool. I did a consortium commission last year, and one of the members of the consortium was my high school band director.
Oh, that's cool.
He's doing orchestra now. It was a string orchestra piece. But yeah, those connections are lifelong. It's amazing.
You never know the impact you're going to have on people.
No, you don't. You certainly don't. So while we talk about impact, can you think of anything that maybe you picked up from Tim Smith that you're still doing today?
He was tough in the sense where he would push the group. He'd push us all to try to be better and aim higher, but it was never in a negative tone or anything that ever felt intimidating. It was always with sort of a loving nod or a loving push. And I've worked with a lot of people that are tough and are, like to push people to achieve more and to be better. But there was something about Tim that just felt perhaps more nurturing, again, instead of intimidating. And in my own teaching, I try to lead that way too. Certainly there are times when I get, frustrated and know my students can do better and will just be very direct with them. But at the core of it, I think all of my students know that I really care about them and that I'm not interested in like winning or just having a perfect concert. I'm interested in them being their very best and feeling great about what they're doing. So I think that's one value that I hope I can do or am doing with my own students. And I think I got that from Tim. But I have to say, I've also received that from other teachers too, but he might've been the first one that showed me that, you can have high expectations, but you don't have to lead with an iron fist.
Yeah. I had this conversation early on in the podcast with Mark Stickney, and he and I talked about fear in the classroom and the ensemble. Well,
there are sometimes two ways to motivate, right? Fear or, the carrot and the stick, right? Fear or motivation. I actually am in the middle of a book called Drive by Daniel H. Pink that's talking about the third element that really actually motivates us, and that is kind of internal drive, desire. That we think that either we have to lead by fear or lead by inspiration, but there's this other kind of, third dimension to consider. So for those of you that are looking at, well, gosh, what are ways to kind of push groups or inspire groups? This is a really interesting read on getting people to build intrinsic motivation, or as a teacher, understanding certain things that are just innate in people regarding intrinsic motivation. So then maybe how can you structure your classroom or your teaching to kind of spark that in your students? I really just got started on it, so I can't give you much more than that, but it's just an interesting way to think about it. And another quick story I'll share, leadership with trying to lead with inspiration versus leading, with fear or intimidation. In a couple of the jobs I've had, my collegiate jobs, I have, I think, succeeded people that perhaps were a little more, old school or led with an iron fist, so to speak, and would do things to make students feel scared about being called out, right? Being called out, doing something wrong in rehearsal. And so I succeeded those people and led with a very different way. And my first semester of evaluations, actually in both environments, there was one or two comments from students that said, please humiliate individuals in rehearsal, or you should make fun of people and make them feel bad for not being prepared or not sounding good or whatever. And I was just starting my college career, and I was relatively young. I still think I'm young, Mark. I'm going to say that for a while. I think I got a couple more years, but I remember, because it was, my first few years of teaching at the college level, I thought, well, gosh, maybe I need to, reevaluate my own approach and be a little bit harder on people and, call them out. And then, I was I certainly didn't do that, but it was over winter break, and I was thinking about just, my own values. And I thought, you know what? No, this is not aligned with who I am. Yes, you need to be honest with students. And if it doesn't sound good, you can tell them that. But sometimes it doesn't sound good because maybe the teacher has overprogrammed. Maybe the person really can't play that lick on their instrument. They just don't know how. So I went back to that rehearsal in both situations, a few years apart from one another. And I just looked at the group and I said, I received this one student evaluation that asked me to humiliate students. And I said, this is just not my style. And if you need, someone to intimidate you or make you feel bad intentionally in rehearsal, I'm not the right teacher. And maybe you might want to just not be in my class. Which of course the students were like, whoa, okay. But I told them, at the end of the day, my values are to try to lead you through this music and lead you through this experience with knowledge and inspiration. And yes, if you're struggling or if you're not doing your job, of course, we'll talk about it, and we'll talk about it in private. But I'm not going to humiliate you, certainly not on purpose, in front of each other. It's just not going to happen.
So now we talked about your high school experience, and how about college? What was that like for you in your music education classes and background in early teaching?
Well, as I mentioned earlier, in a way, because my sort of level of seriousness toward becoming a musician started kind of late, in the sense of my junior year in high school is when I started really taking lessons and doing things outside of just, band class. When I got to college, for my undergraduate, I did feel like I was a little bit behind my peers. I did not have any piano skills. I could just barely play, sort of chord progressions, if that. And so that I felt very behind. I had very little theory, certainly no oral skills, no music history. So I remember my first year just feeling like, whoa, there's so much to learn, and excited by that, but also, a little bit nervous that I had a long way to go and a lot to catch up on. I think my clarinet playing was pretty good. I remember making it into like the top ensemble and making it pretty high up in marching band. So that gave me a little more confidence. Certainly that, okay, I think at least if my clarinet playing is good enough, or going at a high level, then hopefully these other areas that need a bit of work will just catch up with a lot of hard work. In my undergraduate experience, I did go to the University of Minnesota, so I'm at my alma mater here. But I performed and participated in as much as I was humanly able to do. And not because I was trying to prove anything or be crazy, but just because I really just loved it all. I was in marching band, and I was in wind ensemble and symphonic band. I played saxophone in the campus band. I think I even played a little bit in a jazz ensemble, like a second jazz ensemble on bari sax. I played in clarinet choir. I played in like the pit for one musical theater piece. So I was pretty active on just playing both clarinet and saxophone. And my undergraduate degree was music education and clarinet performance. So I, had pretty intensive curriculum and had a lot to do in both of those areas. So I had to give 2 recitals, and I had to take all of the classes that were necessary for education and student teaching and so forth. So I would say I felt like my undergraduate experience was incredibly rich, incredibly vast. I did learn a lot. I always felt like I was just, running all the time, to catch up and also to just participate in everything. But I think that fueled me and made me very excited instead of scaring me. I don't know. Perhaps it gave me more energy and enthusiasm for doing music as a profession. And then I would say, of course, my teachers were fantastic. And the one person that really made an impact on me, all of them did, but the one that made a very strong impact on me was Craig Kirchhoff. And especially an impact in the conducting kind of goals or conducting dream. And Craig was and is just such a terrific conductor. And playing in his ensemble was an amazing experience. It was like nothing I'd ever felt before as a player. His level of detail was so incredible. The way he spoke to us was so eloquent. His ideas were so creative. I just hadn't yet met a person that felt and articulated music in the way that he did. And then his conducting was just unbelievable. And I remember just kind of staring at him and sometimes like losing my place in the music because I was just enraptured in watching him conduct. And then he happened to be teaching the basic conducting class when I was, going through the music ed curriculum, and in that class in a fall semester, I don't even remember what year, but he happened to be teaching that class. And of course that class was amazing and opened my eyes to this whole new world of artistic conducting and score study at the very basic level, of course, but I kind of got the itch. And then I remember then he was hosting those summer conducting workshops. And I asked if I could just come one summer and just play clarinet and just sit in the ensemble and watch. And he said, absolutely, it'd be great. And after that week, this was probably after my sophomore year of college or junior year, I don't remember. But after that week, I went to his office and I said, Professor Kirchhoff, this whole world of conducting is unbelievably appealing to me. But I just don't feel like I look like any of these people. And he just he said, Emily, will you sit down for a minute? And I said, sure. And he said, this is precisely why you should consider this field. If you love this and you think this is work you might want to do down the road, don't worry about what you look like. Just go for it. And, and we talked more about, like you should teach and you should get out and do all this stuff, get practical experience. But I'll never forget those words. And, certainly there was a, long line of things that happened after that, but that got me thinking, well, maybe I could do this if I really work hard and, go to great graduate experiences and just see what I can do.
So that issue we talked a little bit about before we started recording. How important do you think it is for young musicians who are either women or people of color to see people who look like them in the positions of power? Is that, I mean, that's obviously what we're striving for in the field, but how crucial is that, do you think?
I think it is pretty important. I guess, as I said to you in a different conversation earlier, initially when these questions were asked of me, I would perhaps get a bristly reaction to that, or maybe even defensive, because I didn't think I needed to see a woman in the field to do that, because all of my conductors that I had worked with that I admired, they happened to be men, but they were just lovely, amazing men. And it didn't occur to me that I couldn't do that because I was a woman. What occurred to me is I have to get a lot better. I have to know a lot more and get really good to consider that. So it really never occurred to me that I couldn't do it because, and it wasn't because, seeing men or women, I don't know, it didn't occur to me that that wasn't a possibility. Actually, where it occurred to me that I might not be taken seriously was by a female music ed faculty in my undergrad who was teaching elementary methods, and one of the courses I took. And I had said to this person that I was very interested in, teaching high school band right away from college. And this person said, well, that's really going to be unlikely. And I said, oh, why? Because I'm young? And she said, not just that, but not a lot of women get those kinds of jobs. And I thought, oh, okay. I didn't read, it was kind of like, oh, I didn't know that. And that was, okay, well, I guess maybe I have to think about this. But I think that actually fueled me to be like, well, I guess I'm going to be the first. I guess I'll, change that. So to answer your question, I do think it is very important for everyone to see all kinds of people in leadership positions. I hear a lot of people say when I guest conduct, or if I'm doing something, I hear a lot of people say, it's really good for my daughter to see you as a leader in this profession. And then I said, well, thank you. I hope it's really good for all of the students, the male students and the female students, to see a woman in a leadership position or a minority. Because I actually think, if we're going to keep pushing the ball and making change to be equal, I do think that men need to feel comfortable with women being in these positions, perhaps more so than women. But actually, women also need to be comfortable with having women in leadership positions. And as we're learning, women are equally as uncomfortable with this too. It's kind of an interesting phenomenon.
It's incumbent on us, and it makes me very uncomfortable to talk about this because I feel like as a white male, what do I have to say? But really what I have to say is everything, because I'm in a position where I need to be helping and pushing this forward, like you mentioned, pushing that ball forward. But it's hard. It's hard to talk about.
It is. And I think we all just need to be working on it. And I think it's a matter of, not singling someone out because they aren't a straight white man, but just acknowledging, okay, well, looking at your, constituency of whatever organization or ensemble or whatever, if you notice, well, gee, there aren't any of this kind of person, if there isn't this represented, well, why is that? And, are there things we can do to try to change that? Or at least just be curious about it, I suppose, or wonder about it.
Yeah. Well, I certainly think, one of the things I believe more than anything is that a rising tide lifts all boats. I think the people who believe that there's some sort of zero sum in the music world are missing the point here.
Right.
The goal is to have the very best possible ensembles and the very best possible people, and the more of it we have, the more good we have, the more we all have.
Right. That's very true.
So that's the message I try to give to people, and just I do my best in my little corner.
Well, I think we all are trying to do that too.
Yeah. Well, talking about it certainly helps. It enlightens everything.
It does. And as you and I talked about again before this podcast, on another podcast, talking about gender, I believe that, or I hope that, yes, we certainly want to move the dial and we want to aim for much greater equality. But yes, we also have to just find the best person for a given job. And, I will now go through my career, and I have gone through my career thus far, wondering, well, gee, am I getting that job because I'm the best candidate? Or am I getting that job because this organization is trying to fulfill some kind of a quota? And that's always a very troubling question. As a woman, that question comes up every single time I'm a finalist. For me, I just wonder, did I earn this, or am I just here to kind of balance the table?
Isn't that interesting?
And the reality is I'm never really going to know. So it might be why I work really hard all the time, to just subconsciously, prove to myself that actually it's my talent and my hard work and not what I look like.
And so now you went to Northwestern, I know, for one of your degrees. And so what was it like working with Mallory Thompson?
Well, she's amazing. I mean, she taught me a lot about discipline in study, level of expectation of what groups can do and what we need to do to be prepared to work with those students in that level. Her conducting is also just exquisite. I think she's got some of the very best stick technique in the business. Her ears are incredible. And watching her work and watching her assess what she hears and heard and making very quick comments to make adjustments was amazing. She's very fast. She's very efficient. She's also incredibly witty and intelligent and is able to be funny on the podium, a little bit sarcastic when necessary, pointed. So I was immediately attracted to all of those elements about her. She's just a real gem and a gift on the podium in every way, artistically and educationally. And then I would say just inspirationally, I don't know if that's a word, but I think seeing her kind of just carry herself and have high expectations of herself as well. She certainly has high expectations of everyone, but she doesn't set any higher expectations on others than she does on herself. That level of integrity was something that I also really valued and learned a lot about and carry with me, I hope, as best as I can. And she's just got a ton of energy all the time. It's just like, even on weekends, it'd just be like, just buzzing all the time. So, and again, I think I have a lot of energy, but then sitting next to her, I feel like a lump on the. So I really enjoyed that time and learned a lot from her, and learned a lot from the musicians and players there. I mean, the quality of student that goes there is really, really high. From just what they're able to provide on their own instruments. So that was something to stand in front of. Boy, you've got to be prepared to know what to say to, almost professional level musicians. So that was really a treat and pretty intimidating at first, but I got used to it after a few times, and it was very, very nice.
So Emily, to me, Minneapolis represents one of sort of the spiritual centers of new music in America. And I know that you're not necessarily focused on Minnesota composers, but what does working with a composer in new music mean to you?
Well, I would say that in all of my work and my career, I've tried in my own way to work with living composers as often as I can, as often as my budget allows, and with the means that I have in whatever institution I've been at. I have been part of many consortiums where, we've contributed, 1/10 or 1/20 of what the fee is. I have not yet led my own consortium for a variety of reasons. One of which is just I have not had a budget. I've not been at an institution with a budget that was able to do so. And I've just been perhaps I kind of I want to make the right decision, and I don't want to make that decision too quickly. So I've, just kind of seeing who's emerging, who's writing, just kind of getting a lay of the land. And frankly, I've been in too many first years of jobs in the past 15 years. So in other words, I just haven't been anywhere long enough to Okay, this is the person I want to go after, and here's what I want to do. But I absolutely enjoy and love working with new compositions. I try to do new music every year, pieces I don't know, pieces I need to get familiar with, pieces and languages of composers I just want to know, to get in my body and get in my body quickly. So in the past 10 years, I feel like I'm trying to digest new scores all of the time. And I think our medium is, growing and growing richly because so many people are writing for it. It's almost like you can't catch up. You can't catch up with like how many pieces are actually coming out. So for myself, as I see myself in the profession, hopefully 30 more years, if not even longer, I hope that I can start consortiums, get a few more of these off the ground, and go after the right people to write really powerful music. But I do see a lot of fresh and interesting things coming through the pipeline, and I do my very best to, again, support them and to perform music as I'm able to do. I will also say, though, I'm a lover of standards too. I program new music, perhaps not as often as some of my peers do, because I do think it's really important to go after some of these great pieces and composers that maybe aren't as new and fresh today, as they were 20 years ago. So there's so much great rep that I want to make sure that my students be exposed to that too. So it's always finding that balance of doing really great standards and really great pieces that maybe aren't standards, but came out 20, 30 years ago that people maybe haven't done recently. But then also doing stuff that's, fresh off the printer.
Sure. Do you have a formula for that, or at least informal in your mind about how you balance that?
I do not have a formula. I think, again, if in all the jobs I've had, I've looked at what has been done in the last 5 years. So when I start a new job, what pieces have been done in the last 5 years at that institution? What composers have been featured? And I try to not do those pieces or composers in the next 5 years. So my longest job thus far has been 5 years. So this is my second year at Minnesota. So I'm trying to do pieces that Professor Kirchhoff hasn't done recently, just to, kind of keep things fresh. And he did a lot of really great music his last few years, the whole time he was here. But just to not kind of, circulate the things that have been done. So no formula. I mean, I think, I guess on any given program, I try to do it kind of half and half, I suppose. It really depends on the piece.
Mm-hmm. I just wonder about that because I remember when I was a high school director trying to think about, okay, so how am I going to make sure I cover these big pieces, and sort of the balance of that?
Well, so actually, perhaps maybe I do have a formula then, because I will say that I do look at my programming in a 4-year plan.
I see.
And I make sure that I cycle through standard pieces every 4 years. Like I'm going to make sure that, every 4 years I put in like a Tripozzi. I do the Holst E flat, music for Prague, whatever I think are really standard pieces that a college musician should have some familiarity with I make sure that I do those every 4 years.
Yeah, excellent. I think that's the really tough balance. I mean, one of the things that, last summer, the podcast seems to go in like streaks, the themes, as my mind shifts and my opinions shift. And last summer, there was a lot of talk. We talked about how to choose literature in the vast sea of stuff that comes out every year. Because in the graded level, especially at the junior high, there could be 1,000 pieces.
Right. Yeah.
And so sorting through all this becomes a mountain of work.
It's true. Well, and I think sometimes we get seduced by what's new and fresh and shiny, right? Ooh, new sparkly object. And we want to do that and do a whole program of new pieces that seem fresh and exciting. And I think those pieces that just sound great and students enjoy playing, you got to, there's no harm in doing lots of those pieces too, like Bach transcriptions. I don't know if you know the Bach-Mollman transcriptions. Those are incredible. And every time I do them, middle school, high school honor bands, if the students can play it, they love it. So sometimes we forget that some of those standards are actually really fun for students. They like it. Right.
And the goal should be to instill a love of music. That's one of our goals. Should be anyway. Okay. All right. So Emily, we're going to get to my final group of questions that I ask everybody. And so I'll start with the idea of competition in music. Where do you draw the line between healthy and unhealthy competition?
Well, that's a tricky question. Not tricky. It's a good question. Competition is, I think, pretty natural and important to success in anything in our lives. And it's very normal to have some level of competition. I mean, I think we all have, if we're working towards something and we have goals, we all, I think, instinctively have competition or a sense of competitiveness in our DNA. And I think that programs that have absolutely no level of competition or environments that have no competition, I don't know. I don't know that I've seen programs like that when it comes to band programs necessarily, but I think that sometimes it's kind of hard to, push things forward if there's absolutely zero competition. And what I mean by that is, if there are no auditions for first chair or auditions for a solo on a piece of music, or if everything is just completely, rotational, or if there are no, competitions for, getting into certain festivals or something like that. I think competitions can be very healthy and can be really great goals and motivating tools. I just think we have to be really careful, like how we present it, how we use it in our teaching, and how we use it in our own motivation. Certainly when I was in high school, as a clarinet player, I remember very vividly that there was another really, competitive or good clarinet player in my section. And I wanted to be better than her. I just, at the end of the day, to be honest, I wanted to be better than her. And I worked harder to get first chair or to get invited to play the E-flat clarinet because she was really good. And having that person in that section, I think helped me, practice more and helped me see that I wanted a goal. Now, I will say my teacher, back to Tim Smith, he never made me feel like it was a competition between the two of us. In fact, he was really good at one concert I was first chair, the next concert she was first chair. He was good about that. But it was my own intrinsic and internal competition that just wanted to get better. So again, I think there's value in that. And I would say when it comes to programs and competitions, you can think of competitions as like winning state and winning first place at marching band events and whatever. I think that those are, they're just fraught, I guess. And I will also say kind of a completely different story, but related. When I first started teaching at the college level, I was invited to be an adjudicator in the state of Virginia at state contests, high school state contests. And someone there who had been a retired director had given me the framework and had given me the ranking system and, how to judge, and said, you have to be very honest and you have to be fair and blah, 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 blah. And I felt like I had good training. So now I felt like I'm trained to use the system to go into this next environment and to assess. And that person was with me for the first two, regional assessments. Now, as I was learning about this, I also learned that in the state of Virginia, you want to be an all Virginia band. And to do that, you have to win superior and marching band in the fall and superior and concert band in the spring, or, level one, whatever that was. And the first two times I went to these adjudications, I was with this person that kind of shepherded me through, and I would consult with this person after every band and say, okay, I think this band might be a 2, here's why, and what do you think? And he's like, yep, you're right on par. I agree, same thing, whatever. So I felt like I was, okay, I'm learning on the road. I'm doing the right thing, right? Quote unquote, doing the right thing. Well, then about the third time I did that, and that person was not there, I was in a different region, and someone came up to me and said, man, you're really tough on these bands. And I thought, oh, well, really? And then that person said, I invited you because I thought you'd be nice and that you would want to see this as a recruiting tool for your college. And I learned right away, okay, this is the politics. These are the politics that, that I'm dealing with right now. And I did maybe 2 more of those adjudications, and then I decided I'm never doing these again, because this is not what motivated me. I personally, as an artist, I don't want, I don't know. I don't want to be an adjudicator that feels like I have to give someone a ranking, because that is fraught. I don't want people to feel like they are not good because they didn't get a number 1 or whatever. So I just think the idea of competition and where that lies in the state competition, in marching band, in, the program of competition. I just think, again, there are healthy ways to do it, but I think there are very, very unhealthy and very political ways that I don't know, it's just very messy and complicated. So I actually stopped, I don't know, that was 10 years ago or something. I will not do rated adjudications.
How do you find work-life balance in your career as a teacher, as a musician?
Well, as I've said in a few other interviews on this, I don't know that I'm a great example of that. I'm a better example of work-life balance today. I would say that I did not have a healthy work-life balance, in the past 20 years. I think our job and our work is just very, very all-consuming. And as we talked about, I think because I had this, whether it was real or not, but the sense of always being a little bit behind everyone, I felt like I always had to work extra hard to be competitive or to be at their level. And when that started in college, like this idea of, oh my gosh, I have so much to learn. I have so much to catch up. I have to do this better. I have to do stay up later and do this. That sense of level of detail work, that work ethic, if you want to call it that, has never gone away. Because then once I started teaching high school, the job was so big and it was such a new, learning curve that I did that same I put that same energy toward my high school teaching job. And I was in that job for 3 years and, got there early, stayed late, did not have much of a social life. Now I was lucky that I met my partner, my husband, in college, in my undergrad. Just couldn't shake each other. So even though I was very busy post college, we lived together and we kind of hung out a lot, so that was nice to have him, but I really didn't do much other than work. And then once I started grad school, well, that was again, another step of whoa, learning curve, overwhelming. I feel like I've got to catch up. So I was just already in the habit of kind of swimming really fast, right? Like my beginning. So that I just perpetuated that in grad school. And then, as I said earlier, I've been in new jobs so frequently. This is the last one, by the way, but I've been in new jobs so frequently that it isn't until that 4th or 5th year where you feel just a little bit settled, where you have space to think outside of the job. Because in all the jobs I had, I was changing the program and growing the program and growing my career and growing my own, guest conducting and whatever. So honestly, since 1994, which is when I started undergrad, I've been working really, really hard nonstop. And, my husband's great. We're still married and he, I think, still likes me. And we have a 2-year-old daughter now. And I would say that has forced me to really check out how much time I'm putting into certain things. And so I'm certainly more balanced now than I ever have been because of her and because of me wanting to put time into our family, for sure. But even with that, my daughter's in daycare right now. I'm not with her. So it's been tough. It's been really tough to, pursue this, to move. My husband and I have moved, 8 times, I think. And actually, he and I lived apart for 6 years. We were still married, but he lived in Chicago while I lived in DC and in Virginia. And then, and that was very hard. I don't recommend that. And so for us, again, I don't know that I'm the poster child of work-life balance for sure. But I hope in five years or so, or next year, I'll have a better sense of that. And as I said, our daughter has really helped me get better at that.
Yeah. So this is my big question, and the hardest question perhaps. What are the challenges facing music education, and how can we best meet them as we move into the 21st century?
Well, this is a very good question, obviously, and this is on my mind a lot as someone who has a pretty big position and who plans to stay in this job for a very long time till I retire. I see myself in a new role, and I feel the weight and responsibility of doing what I can with my own students to really make an impact. And I've been asking myself, especially this year, what exactly is the impact that I want to make on my conducting students? What is the impact I want to make on those that come through my ensemble? And what is the impact that I want to make on those music ed majors that I have some small interaction with? I actually, in the job that I have, I don't work with the music ed cohort that much. And I think you're going to find directors of bands at large schools, have this same situation, same issue, because our conducting is with the top quote unquote ensemble. And that's not always filled with undergrad music ed majors.
Right. Yep.
So the person that conducts the group that has that body of people in there is my colleague, Jerry Lucart. So he has much more interaction with those students kind of on a daily basis. Mm-hmm. And then, my graduate conducting cohort and teaching graduate conductors, well, that's a very different, group of people. Their goals may be to teach at the college level or to move on to a doctoral degree in conducting. Some of them might want to be professional conductors, so it's a different cohort. So again, my interaction with undergraduate music ed majors, I have to think about that, and I have to be mindful of, well, how can I engage with those students more? I am teaching an undergraduate conducting course, and I work with that cohort in that class. So it's like, one semester. But anyhow, so I've really been thinking a lot about that. Well, what are my values? What am I, what's sort of the next generation? What are the challenges we have ahead of us? And how can I actually make an impact on that? And not just by saying, gee, what are the challenges? What can I actually do? So I think one of the bigger issues that is not a new issue, but something that I think about certainly, at least in the collegiate world, the top level, like wind ensemble world. I see that wind ensembles and the repertoire that we're performing, I don't know if we're really attaching or connecting with our audiences in as meaningful of a way as I think that we can. And I bring up the wind ensemble, the academic wind ensemble world, because, if that is our kind of the top artistic expression, or the top artistic standard, that's the next step, I should say, before professional bands, let's say, right? So before professional military bands or professional community bands, which there aren't very many of. So if that's, kind of the close to the cream of the crop, what are we programming there, and what are our audiences there? And, how can we try to build more audiences to love that level of band music? And then if they love that level of band music, will they then want to support young people going through the system to perform that? So it's kind of a top-down approach in a way. Now, the other way to look at it is like, okay, how do we inspire, fourth graders, fifth graders, and parents of those young people to want to get their kids to perform in these, in these ensembles? So what I don't know is, do parents know that you can actually have a career, and kind of go through the system and perform at a really high level? I don't know. People are aware of professional symphony orchestras, so like there's sort of the idea of like performing in an orchestra as an option. And I think people are aware of like music teachers being an option. But as far as like the track of like, okay, this is kind of a line you can take to be a band musician or whatever, like following kind of the band track. I'm just not sure that the average person in the country is very familiar with that. Certainly my parents were not, and I didn't know. So, and when I go on airplanes and travel and so forth, everyone's always asking, oh, you're a conductor. Do you conduct orchestra? It's like, well, no, I conduct band. And like, oh, marching band? So it's like, this idea of what concert band is and, kind of in a bigger scope. I'm not sure that most people really know about that. So anyhow, so it's kind of a wandering answer to your question, but I think that there are, in a global sense, finding a way to connect our art form, as in concert band. So I'm separating this from marching band, because I actually think marching band is doing quite well. Like drum corps and marching band, I think they're getting a lot of press and a lot of attention, and a lot of students want to participate. And I think a lot of parents know what that is and appreciate that and support that. But when it comes to concert band or, concert band or artistic, perhaps wind band medium, I'm not sure that people really understand what that is. And I don't know the best way to inform or to educate or to think about that. But I think that's something that I'm trying to find a way to just make that more appealing or make that more broad sweeping and connecting to greater audiences. And I think ways to do that is, and everyone's doing this in all performing venues, I think, is conductors are talking more to the audiences, or doing pre-concert lectures, or composers are talking more to the audiences. We started doing things here, and I started this at Temple, just maybe doing some like visual thing, whether it's an image of a composer or maybe a little, artistic print on a screen that we happen to have in our performance venue before the piece is played, or, like a program note, a visual program note, or a video introduction or something. Because I do think that our society is very visual in its, kind of perception of the world. So in other words, to connect the audience to the oral journey that they're about to go on in a concert band experience, finding ways to kind of attract the listener to that experience, I think is really important. Because I think if you look at, when I do honor bands or all state bands or whatever, and you look at like, wow, there's a huge audience here. It's like, well, the audience in those environments, or even high school band concerts, tend to be parents or loved ones of their children.
Right.
And once those children go to college, parents aren't there. I mean, unless they live close, right? So that's when you see like not big audiences are in college band concerts, unless, that college is like the only game in town, and that, the reputation of that band is like amazing, and, community members go. But there's a disconnect, I think, there.
But even that's rare. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think when I bring up the top down approach, I wonder if we have to, if maybe mom and dad or, grandma and grandpa are not like in love with having their kid play a band instrument early on, because they're not sure what the value is when that person is 30.
Sure.
I just don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting that you say that. I mean, I joke about the fact when people ask me, because I write mostly junior high band music, and my audience isn't really the parents in the seats. It's really the kids and the directors, because the parents are going to love whatever the kids do. So I even make a joke of this.
Well, and I mean, so the activity, of course, is essential, right? I think there's no doubt that like being in a group and working together for a common interest, and, combining all these instruments and timbres and like, one thing, like one ensemble, and having composers write music for the group and, featuring soloists, right? Like all of that, there's so much, awesome in just the activity itself, for sure. There's no doubt. And I applaud that. And I love that there are more and more composers like yourself, writing for, middle school groups, elementary groups, developing ensembles. It's great. We need more of that. But I just wonder, like kind of taking a global step and looking at band, concert band again, not jazz, not orchestra, not marching band. Because again, I think those groups they're growing and thriving in different ways. But concert band as an art form, I just don't know that it's got the same, sex appeal, to be honest, or the same awareness beyond like the educational values in public school or in school. And so that's why I say, like, the top down, where are the professional bands? Well, we've got military bands. That's certainly one. And then we've got just a couple of these, semi-professional wind groups, like the Dallas Winds is one. But beyond that, quote unquote, the top level is, college or university. And so, if a parent is like making a decision to buy a student a clarinet or a trumpet in 5th grade, and, I don't know. I just don't know if they're thinking 20 years down the road and thinking, well, gee, there may not be much, value for the student. Whereas there is professional football and there is professional baseball and whatever. So yeah, that's where I think, we need to be thinking, like, is there something we can do? Or do we need to? I don't know. Maybe we don't need to have professional bands and, attract people. Maybe it can just be an activity just to be an activity. I don't know. But that's what I'm thinking a lot about, is just the big picture, and how everything that I do, I try to make, a real impact on the audience. I try to connect my story or my passion or my teaching or the pieces of music I'm doing or my talking to just get the audience to feel something in the performance and to want to, be happy for their student, like sounding good, but also to like take them on a journey beyond where they were before they got there.
Do you have any advice for your younger self? Like, if you were able to go back and give yourself a bit of advice at your high school graduation, what might that be?
Well, I have to say, I'm proud of myself for taking as many risks as I did. And I took a lot along the way. I think the biggest one was the risk of living apart from my husband. And that was actually because he supported me while I was in graduate school. And then he wanted to go to grad school. And it was, I had to support. I wanted to, but I had to support him. And so it was a risk, but it was worth it for sure. And luckily it worked out in the end. But so I'm proud of myself for the kind of mindset of taking risks and trying things and kind of putting myself in very stressful and uncomfortable situations, kind of a lot actually. And what I would say to my, younger self is perhaps, I would say keep taking risks. It's good to be uncomfortable, number one. And I would say perhaps maybe don't take myself too seriously, and to really force myself to find some time for me, or time to like nurture something other than my work. One little side story, before I started grad school, I actually used to make jewelry, like just a hobby thing, like make little earrings and necklaces and stuff. And I remember, and I loved doing that. And my sister and I would, go to little art fairs. She would make hats and I would make jewelry, and we'd set up our little table. And it was just so sweet and fun and just, I don't know, a great little thing that we did. And then when I started my master's, I remember I had, several toolboxes and little boxes of jewelry stuff. And I remember calling a friend and saying, well, I'm going to have to close this chapter of my life. Do you want my materials? And I just dropped off this giant box of stuff. And it was very sad. And I, just remember feeling like, well, kind of cutting off a part of my body and just giving it away, to sacrifice it for something else. And I still haven't picked up jewelry again because I literally haven't had time, to put toward that. So I think if I were to, rewind the clock, I would, if I could, just force myself to squeeze in a little more time that wasn't focused on work.
What would be the last piece for band that you would conduct? Or orchestra, or anything?
I have an answer, and that is Copland's Appalachian Spring for 13 musicians.
When I first decided that I was going to be a composer, and this wasn't until I was junior year of college, I remember one of my teachers there said, I want you to go and I want you to get the score and listen to Appalachian Spring and make notes about the orchestration. And I listened to that piece over and over and over that spring. And it's just I love that piece so much.
It's just one of those that I think I could live with over and over again. And every time the last note fades out and is over, I sit there and I just want time to stand still. Mm-hmm. And then I want to go back and start it over again.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. It's simple, I know, and it's not Beethoven, I know, but there's just something about that gets me every time.
Simple is okay.
I think sometimes that's true, yes.
Sometimes the most sophisticated thing is the simplest because it's the answer that requires courage.
It's true. That's very good.
Is there anything coming up that you'd like to share or promote?
In a few weeks here, we are performing our final Wind Ensemble concert, and we're doing all music of Michael Doherty, and Michael will be here in residence. And it is Craig Kirchhoff's final semester of retirement. He's been doing a 3-year phased retirement, and he will be conducting Doherty's Labyrinth of Love with the amazing soprano Hila Plitman. And we're also featuring the tuba concerto, Reflections on the Mississippi, with Steve Campbell, who's Minnesota Orchestra tuba player and also on faculty here. And then I'll be conducting the final piece, Niagara Falls. And I think it's going to be really a beautiful and evocative and fun, kind of an emotional performance from start to finish, for many, many reasons. And I'm very, very excited that that's going to be our final concert of the semester. And it will be live streamed, so people can watch from abroad. And that's on Wednesday, May 2nd, 7:30 Central Time.
Emily, how can people get in touch with you?
You can just email me. I think if you Google my name, you'll see my Minnesota webpage, and all of my contact information is there. But you can just email me at my last name, which is Threinen, Threinen, @umn.edu.
Excellent. Emily, thank you so much for your time.
It's my pleasure, Mark. Thank you for the invitation.